2024 has been a very, very interesting year for a lot of different industries and segmentations within the recruiting industry. But let's just start with how's business?
Mhm. I'll jump in. It's wonky, is what I would say. It's been a weird year. First half of the year, we struggled to get jobs, truthfully. There were very few jobs, so focused on business development. In the last 2 months, we've gotten jobs, but filling the jobs has been a challenge. Clients are skittish. I think it's representative of the entire marketplace. They don't want to pull the trigger quickly. So it has not been our best year by any case. And we're in marketing, consumer insights, shopper, digital, e-commerce. That's our world, coast to coast, all levels from C-suite down to a couple of years out of school.
That's great. Peter, Brandon?
Yeah, same thing. It's been a challenge this year. And a lot of our clients are just we focus in performance marketing, smaller agencies throughout the United States. People are waiting for interest rates to change, to lower. They're waiting for the election. Clients, brands are trying to really get more out of agencies and lower fees. So there's a lot of headwinds facing smaller entrepreneurial firms. And so just what Chris said, the hires are very strategic and they're really looking hard at every candidate, and they don't want to make any misfires. So top of that, all the new technologies, how is AI impacting the industry? And there's a lot of unsettled thinking going on out there.
Yeah. Brandon, how about you?
I would say the last 6 months, kind of to pile on to what Peter said, is just the economy has been a very interesting insight for a lot of people. You know, candidates aren't as willing to relocate for roles because houses are more expensive. So that makes it more interesting with your candidate pool because you have to find more local talent that doesn't necessarily have to relocate. But as far as business, I guess I'm blessed to be in a space where there's a need. So my trouble and my hurdle is finding candidates, but there seems to be a pretty good need for my niche within that civil geotechnical engineering space. It's mostly just the sourcing, getting the right people, getting in front of candidates that are either passive or active, and just trying to be in more places than one, all the time.
Sure. Yeah, which is really interesting is the fact that, like you mentioned, Chris, you've kind of experienced both, kind of a mix between what Peter and Brandon were mentioning there. And so whether it is something from Brandon's perspective where you're having a hard time being able to find the right individual, right candidate, but you have enough job orders. But then from your guys' perspective, you have some candidates, but it's very difficult to find job orders themselves. What are some things you all are doing to be able to help yourself stand out and cut through the noise and be able to get to those, whether it's respective candidates or clients?
A couple of things we do is we stay really close to our candidates, senior level folks. We pay a lot of attention to LinkedIn. When people move, we stay on top of them. We'll send videos congratulating them, but also saying when you're ready to build your team, we're there. And truthfully, that's how we get majority of our jobs. It's because our relationships, it's not advertising or anything else. So that's it. And then with candidates, our database allows us to put attributes in. So when we have to slice and dice jobs specific ways, and that's what clients come to us for these days, it's kind of the purple squirrel. It's those attributes and matching of them that allows us to get to those candidates very efficiently and effectively and deliver them to candidates more quickly than their internal folks can.
So Chris, real quick before we go to the Peter and Brandon on that same question. So it sounds like a lot of things that you're doing is from a perspective of just staying the course of things that you guys have always done that's allowed you to be successful.
Yeah, and I would say that is true, but you have to work harder today than you did in the past.
Okay, interesting.
It is a little bit like slogging through quicksand.
Yeah.
Brandon, go ahead.
I would just agree with that. I mean, it's not as easy as just a one touch point get a
Yeah.
candidate, get a client. It's multiple touch points. It's staying in touch with them. It's being that, from the candidate standpoint, it's being that the recruiter that they know and trust or have seen versus just being that random one that comes out of the woodwork messaging them about a job, asking for a resume. That's a big part of what I've kind of done even the last couple of years to build my own personal brand. And it has now benefited me now that I've gone out on my own, is just being a presence on LinkedIn, being in front of my ideal candidates, my ideal clients with LinkedIn groups, and just creating content that's relevant to them. It's not, my presence is to be a resource for them, not always about me. So that's where I try to just, be a value add for candidates and clients and be the one that they trust to call when they need something.
And Brandon, I want to come back to that personal brand in just a second, but Peter, same question that we've been addressing.
Yeah, the same thing. I mean, if you're working with smaller brands, smaller companies, and you've been around for a while, you can't survive relationships with candidates and clients and being very consultative. The big change that we've seen in the last year, 6 months, think about your inbox, how it's changed. And it's just an avalanche of stuff. And so what we're trying to do is any messaging that we're doing, we're trying to make it very targeted, very individualized as much as possible. If we've talked to you in the last 2 years, we're sending you an email once every 6 weeks, whether you're a candidate or a client, and really strong industry insights, trends, where we think things are going. And just marry that out with, when we do reach out to people we really don't know, we try to make sure that it's relevant to them. Like we don't just shoot out emails broadly. We're very targeted. And then we have a very specific message, and we share a lot of information right away. We use your custom presentation page for candidate presentations and job presentations. It's been a great tool for us. The markets responded to that. They really like the idea of knowing more about the job, hearing the hiring manager, or even who the client is before we even talk to them. And that has really helped us come through all that clutter in the inbox.
Yeah, no, that's great. And being able to be that as you guys have all talked about, that providing value, right, to those prospective clients and candidates within that relationship. One of the things, Brandon, I want to get back to that you mentioned is that personal brand. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because I'm aware of watching that kind of progression. You and I have gotten to know each other for years now.
Don't make me feel old. Like I'm getting gray hair, but you don't need to highlight.
Years doesn't have to mean old. It's not decades. It's years.
Fair enough. It's years.
But we've been communicating and talking off and on before we even got a chance to work together. And part of that was through things that we've done with our personal brands. And so talk a little bit about how that's impacted your desk and the things that you've been able to do within the industry.
I would say at the baseline of everything, it warms up every conversation. I've had companies that I call and I say, hey, this is Brandon McGill. And they're like, if you're calling to recruit our people, we know who you are. And I'm like, no, I'm actually calling to bring you somebody. And like, oh, that warms things up. But, it's just having that personal brand, having recognition within my niche. It just simply warms up the conversations. Like, people are a little bit more welcoming when they somewhat recognize a name or a face. And it's not as much of a hard slam of a phone or a rejection email, because like, oh, you're human. We know who you are. And that's more of the feedback I get, is just more of that. It's not always the positive that I wish it was, but it's positive in this light of they're not just being rude. They realize I'm a person. I'm not just a random recruiter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Chris and Peter, any thoughts on personal brand and how you build that?
One thing that I do is I'll ask people to write recommendations on LinkedIn. And I will tell people to go there, even in an email that I'll send to them, because I'll say, if you want to see how I and we operate, just go check it out. And that'll tell you how we as the O'Connell Group operate. The other thing is, like Brandon said, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I wrote a book 4 years ago. I talk about that. I did a ton of podcasts. And I also post, and if I see a post that I like, I will share that post and put my own twist on it. And I often talk to people and they say, we haven't talked in 2 years, but I see you all the time on LinkedIn, and I love, you continue to bring, and everybody at the O'Connell Group does this, but you continue to bring value and remind me of what's important.
Yeah.
The other thing that we at the O'Connell Group do, and I think you guys probably do it too, but we help people with the resumes. We do interview prep, and we make sure that people are set up for success. We, really and truly, we want everybody every step of the way to have every advantage so that they can succeed. And if they don't make it, we never ghost them. We get the feedback so that they can improve. So even though they may not get the result they're getting, they get feedback so they can course correct. So we want them to walk away feeling better than they went in, even if they don't win. And that's just kind of our philosophy.
Great.
I'd say at the very least, feeling good about our presence in that
Yeah.
process, right? I mean, they may not have had
Yeah.
a great interview, but that's
Right.
that's part of where we help them to get there and know what they're going in confident and being able to come out confident.
Right.
That's great. Let's switch a little bit of topics here, and Peter, I'll address this to you first. I feel like if we don't mention this, that this meeting and discussion probably never really even happened. And so I'm going to say it, and it's going to get everyone really excited. But AI. All right, so AI. So now that we got it in there, right? So in what ways are you guys currently using AI within your day-to-day activities as recruiters, or are you, Peter? I'll start with you.
Well, yeah, so we're not using it in terms of creating content or letters. It's we write our own stuff, and we have our own voice. And I don't want to, go down that route until it's way better than it is right now. But we do use it in terms of, how, like what jobs are being hired in this space. We're trying to get things that are very current, in terms of, if I'm thinking of product managers and what they're thinking about and how people become, what's a typical career path. It's things like that. But the reality is, we're a small firm. We try to be very high touch, and so we're just sitting here kind of watching and waiting for what's really going to help us just be better at what we do. So it's not very exciting yet.
Chris or Brendan?
We're using it not enough, but we're using it to streamline. Like when we are writing job descriptions or company write-ups, or we get a new client in a new category, we need to understand the space better. Things like that. We're trying to use it to help us be smarter and faster. But I know there are other ways we should be using it that we're not yet. So I am excited to continue to learn how to utilize it.
I'm in a very similar boat. Like I use it for certain aspects to help me just be more efficient. And I don't use it for my content per se. I'll use it for maybe context, and then make it my own, and put my voice behind it. But sometimes it's content, being consistent with content's tough. Sometimes you have to have outside thoughts to get ideas and things to run with, or just learning more about a certain topic. Or like I said, rephrasing. Like I use it to rewrite resumes at times for candidates, because I have to blind them out for an NPC or an MPA type of a campaign. I use it just to save me time of literally reformatting it from the ground up. I'll just say, hey, reformat, take away, blind out this resume. It'll do it for me. I'll go in, make the tweaks I need to make, and off I go. But it saves me time in so many ways. But it's not an everyday use. I rely on it for mostly just assisting, not heavily leaning on it.
Sure. Now, if you guys could think of, this could be completely made up. It is in a perfect world. If you guys could think of one AI tool that would absolutely change your desk, or something that AI could do for you, what kind of tool would that be, or how would AI be able to be used to change what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, I'll jump on that. I've been thinking about this for years, because there's certain times when people are open to making a move. And one of them is when your boss leaves. And so if I could have a tool that says, okay, these are the people that I target, and their boss just left, and they tell me, that would be the perfect time to reach out to that potential candidate. So it's things like that. It's like real time changes that make either a client more open to being a client or a candidate more open to talking. I'm all for that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say as far as just this sifting through potential candidates, I mean, that would be huge for me to say, hey, here's my main criteria I'm looking for. Give me the top 20, 30 out of my own database and, put that in a list for me or whatever. And so I can call through them or reach out to them or whoever that needs to look like. But it's just purely that I would say more of the sourcing aspect would be amazing just for saving time in that section of what we do.
And I would do the flip side because you need candidates, I need
Yeah.
clients. I would say
Yeah.
sift through all the jobs in my space or
Yeah.
adjacent spaces. Bring me all the jobs that are director and above that I want to see just in time. And actually even write the initial email for me and let me tweak it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. Yeah. I asked that so that way we can develop products and then sell them to you guys afterwards.
Awesome. Go for it.
So, all right. So we talked a little bit about adaptability in our presentation that we just gave between me and Emily. And as Chris, as you mentioned, maybe let's start with you. You saw the market kind of change from the beginning of the year to this part of the year. What are some things that you guys have done to be able to roll with that and be able to adapt to that market?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's one thing we did when the market was really tight is we just focused heads down on business development, being just really heavy duty. But then as we started getting jobs, we realized that clients were kind of competing against us, that they were looking internally. So we tried to shift as much as we could away from contingent to at least engage so that even if they filled the jobs, we still got paid. So we could cover our overhead. So that's been a really big push for us over the last couple of years. We don't want to work for free anymore. We've invested 30 plus years in building our relationships. And that's really what you're paying us for. It's not the work today. It's the relationships over the past 30 years that's allowing us to bring the slate forward.
Great. Brandon or Peter?
I mean, do you mind just repeating that question? I was paying so close attention to her, I kind of lost track of what the question was.
Yeah, and your market maybe didn't fluctuate quite as much, but in the course of this last year, 2024, what are some things that you've done to be able to adapt to the different changing environment of things that we've seen within the industry? So whether it's transition to being more candidate focused, more client focused, or even just a little nuance, and maybe in your case, even starting a firm, what are some things that you've done to be able to adapt to that industry?
I think a big part of it is just, it's a very candidate heavy centric right now for what we're looking like. A lot of people are looking for the geotechnical and civil engineers. It's a very high demand at the moment. I have a lot of conversations with clients on the get-go of like, are their expectations realistic? Are they going to be able to find somebody that's a, 8-year licensed engineer for $100,000? Like, it's a rare thing to be able to find that. And I try to help just set those expectations so that their reality is a little bit more in line with just where the market is. So having those conversations, they're not always fun conversations. It's been times where I haven't taken on searches because they're not flexible. And, it's already tough finding engineers, but finding the head of the needle in the haystack is that much harder. It's more of okay, well, I can potentially help you, but we need to be in line with where market is, because if you're below it, you've got some other things that you're going to have to figure out, and you can hire as many recruiters as possible. You're behind market. And it's just having those conversations of where your demand is, where the market is, and, and just being upfront of those. And it's won clients and it's lost clients, but the reality is, I'm better off on searches that are realistic versus ones that aren't.
Yeah, great. Peter, what about yourself? What are some things you've done to adapt?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you were recruiting in 21, 22, you have a lot of time for marketing. And so we let some muscles atrophy there, and we've been building that back up and promise not to let it fall away ever again. But, we have long-term clients, and some of them are suffering, and as they come back, we're trying to be one-off, like how we deal with these folks. And we're trying to meet them where they are right now. We have clients that, we're we're giving them very good flat rate searches right now because they've been great to us for 7, 8 years, and they're suffering and they need people. So yeah, we're cutting them some breaks on a one-off basis. But really, what Chris said is, whether it's engaged search or whatever your vehicle, we have to be very risk averse to wasting our time on bad searches, right? We have to make sure the search is real. They know what they want, that we can find it for them. And we just can't afford to work on anything that doesn't fit. That lowers our opportunity of making a place.
Yeah, that's great, y'all.
Agreed.
All right, so we have just a few minutes left, so it's time to get out your crystal balls for me. And I want you to tell me exactly, like, and everyone here, so we all know what to prepare for. And if you're wrong, we're going to be able to cite this video and come back to it and hold each and every one of you accountable. Right. So what's going to happen? What should we expect for the rest of the year, and then also for 2025? What's your guys' take on that?
Ooh. I can jump on that grenade, I guess. It's kind of unforeseen. I've heard a lot of feedback that I've had from clients and from candidates is just the economy is unknown. It's election year, so just a lot of unknowns for both companies and candidates. So, I mean, from previous election years, it's always a little bit of a slowdown until, like, even going through the holidays. It's usually just slower than normal, and people are pushing more and more things off until they know what's more happening with the election and just economy worries. But usually once that's over, I mean, we all have to go back to getting to work. That doesn't change. So usually it's a mad rush after the fact, and fingers crossed that is the case again this year. But people will push off and push off and push off until they're like, we can't wait anymore, we have to go. And then the floodgates open and it's a little bit chaotic. But fingers crossed that is the case, and people just push off to the first of the year, and then elections are done, we can get back to somewhat of a normal again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pent up demand, pent up move. People have been holding on to their jobs, right? The economy, depending on how you look at it, either there is a recession or there isn't, but everyone's a little bit scared. But the people that we're talking to are holding on to jobs that maybe they wouldn't have held on to 2 years ago. And as things start to settle down a little bit, I see a lot of movement happening in our space. So I think we're going to be busy, just because these smaller firms, the reason we work with them is they don't have recruiting teams. They can't afford it. And so we're already getting calls from some owners, and I think we're actually going to rebound pretty well. This is also the busiest time of the year for performance marketing now. So thanks, Kim.
Yeah, I would agree with both Peter and Brandon. I think tomorrow we'll know a little bit more with the interest rates. I think that's a big deal. I think the election, I think the election will settle people down. In my industry, a lot of companies have had layoffs, and I think they went too deep, and they're going to quickly realize that. So I agree. We're doing a lot of small company, mid-sized companies. The big companies have already, they have their own sourcers. So we've kind of walked away from them. But I think fourth quarter, there are a lot of companies whose budgets are use it or lose it. So those people are going to be frantically hiring fourth quarter because they've been holding off. And then I think next year it's going to be replace all the people we let go. And so all those people who have been on the sidelines for much longer than they'd like to be, I think the future looks bright.